Thanks for everybody for tuning in. My name is Guneet, and today we have Clyde with us. Clyde is a podcaster and covers a lot happening in Canadian politics. Thank you for talking to us, Clyde.
Absolutely. Thanks for interviewing me.
You've been a close watchful media personality about what's happening in Canadian politics and what's happening in BC politics. We saw the NDP coming in again in October, and here you are at the AGM of the BC Conservative. What has happened in the last 4 months since the election?
Well, there was an election. Let's just say the election didn't go the way we thought it might go. We thought that there was going to be a big blue wave in British Columbia. It took them about a month to figure that out. This is where a lot of people are looking at the election and there's some anomalies and they want to get to the bottom of that. Now, that being said, we do have a NDP government by a very slim margin at the moment. I wanted to come to the AGM to see what's happening internally with the party, see who's running to be president and part of the board, this kind of thing. So I'm really, I talk on my podcast a lot about getting involved in politics and not just, democracy isn't just ticking a box every 4 years. Go get involved, talk to people, speak with everybody. People are unbelievably accessible, actually. It's not what you think when you get into this kind of thing. So get in there, meet some people, shake some hands, and find out what's going on. I hope that, possibly even within the next year, we might end up into another election. We've got a very slim lead with the NDP, which is it's territory for another election coming up. It could happen at any point. Let's hope that, number one, that the Conservatives are more prepared going into it. And on top of that, let's have more people being a little bit more scrutinous about how the votes are counted. And we'll see what democracy brings us after that.
Spend some time talking to us. 4 months have passed. There was a big blue wave that people anticipated. Why do you think that they were not able to form the government?
So my knee-jerk reaction would be, just look at who was counting the votes. But I mean, if we're not going to get into, you could say that the election was rigged or what. It seems to be a taboo subject right now, but it was an unprecedented, weird election where we had voting week instead of voting day. Things were done in really strange circumstances where, some of the staff they were allowed to take home ballots overnight with them to have in their private home and then return back with them. There's a lot of really just weird stuff. And if there was no anomalies, as they like to call it, if none of that was happening, they've definitely made the environment to make people feel less secure about the result of the election. So that, for a lot of people, is why a lot of people on the conservative side think that the big blue wave didn't occur. But then there's also the fact that we are in a very leftist province. Let's just be honest. The Lower Mainland is very left leaning. And while the Conservatives are, only just gaining some sort of market brand recognition with a lot of Canadians. And I think it has to do with what's going on with the economy, with crime, with drugs. And this is what's bringing people over to the Conservative side. I think they just need a little bit more motivation or maybe a little bit more ability to talk to people. I think it would come even bigger next time around.
You're a media podcaster, so talk to us about the media landscape of Western Canada in particular, if you can, and spend some time about comparing the mainstream and the independent and alternate media and what's happening at the media side.
We've got two types of media in Canada. We've got the propaganda from the government, and then we've got people who have just real voices. And that's the thing. You see the media tends to swing one way or the other. You see independent sources going a little bit more conservative these days, a little bit more to the right. At least it feels that way, it seems that way, because how left the paid for media is. So we have an interesting circumstance here. In Canada, the CBC is, funded to the tune of $1.4 billion per year, with a B, billion dollars. That's a tremendous amount of money for a population of 40 million people, right? This is insane. Not only that, but the CTV, Global, all of these, what are known as independent media outlets, but they're mainstream. They're also subsidized to a tremendous degree. And if that's their funding model, we know that that's going to be, the ruling party is going to be the one calling the shots on what happens, whether it's implicit or not. If you always kind of, you're not going to bite the hand that feeds you. Independent media is a different game altogether. This is more just independent voices. People are concerned. I mean, I got my start talking about what was happening in the Freedom Convoy because I saw the news was just being completely untrue. I mean, they were telling outright lies about what was happening in that situation, when we could go on Facebook and TikTok and see people sharing videos of what was happening on the ground. So this is what's happening. People in journalism have retired their hat. They've put down their hat, and they've left an entire industry open for people like me to just come in and tell what I believe to be the truth.
And do you think people are resonating to that? People are resonating the truth that the alternative media is presenting them, or able to tell them? Because the independent media like yourself doesn't have that technology capacity, or say that amount of infrastructure that the mainstream media or resources has. So are people resonating what you guys have been telling?
Well, people are resonating towards it, but you talk about infrastructure, and this is, I think, the most interesting part of the story here is traditionally it used to be that. It used to be you have to have thousands of dollars of equipment just to get out on the street, and you don't need that anymore. Everyone has the technology in their pocket. And this is the reality of the situation. You can just go out and film things, and you can just go out and turn on your computer, turn on your phone, and talk about what's happening here and now. And then you have people like me that are just basically aggregators of that information. So I scour the internet and I look for people who are in particular situations and are reporting on things, and I bring this to an audience. So what's happened in recent years is the technological innovation of basically making this, they've made it cheaper to basically compete with the big players, and the big players don't like this very much. So what have they done? They've turned around and they're lobbying government to get their market share back, but it's never coming back. We're the news. We are the news now, and this is the way it's going. Yes, people are receiving it well, and governments aren't, but that means we're doing well.
We talked about a bit of how and why conservatives didn't see that blue wave. In your opinion, why does NDP so sticky around in this province? Of course, there's people that have left leaning, but that doesn't change. Like, if people's pockets are being hurt, the economy is not doing well, something's got to change for them. But why do you think still works with people, and how is NDP able to still get themselves so sticky with the British Columbians?
I talk about this a lot, like the mind virus. A lot of people say about the woke mind virus, but the original meme, if the coined by Richard Dawkins meaning of the word meme is a mind virus. It's the idea of a thing that a viral thought, and the original meme in that sense is Marxism. It really comes down to it, and Canada's primed for Marxism. It's really difficult to sell the idea of personal responsibility. Personal freedom comes at a cost, and it comes at the cost of your own responsibility. Take care of your damn self. It's not a popular issue with a lot of people that just want to be coddled. And in British Columbia, you see a lot of that, especially Lower Mainland, that kind of thing. A lot of people, they want to be taken care of. They don't like this idea of having to take care of themselves. They think that the government that's ultimately their responsibility. And a lot of that priming comes from our educational system. We've been teaching people Marxism from day one. We were erasing our own history of the country. Most people don't even know who John A. Macdonald is anymore. The kids growing up. And if they have heard of him, they think he's an awful person for whatever reasons that their high school teacher told them. So yeah, we need to turn things around. But I think this is why there's the whole sticky wicket of trying to shake Marxism off in Canada. Eventually, I'm hoping that we'll win this battle, we'll win this fight. But it's a hard battle, and I think the Conservatives are doing a bang up job of it, considering how left British Columbia is. Seeing 49% of the legislature being Conservative is a win, and it's a move in the right direction.
Let's talk about the culture in Canada, and let's talk about the culture of politics for a second. And in that, I want to bring in Trump, because Trump is seen as a threat to Canada. Of course, he has mentioned about the sovereignty of Canada, 51st state. But there's a I would say a gap between the conservative of Trump conservative or MAGA conservative than Canadian conservative. Do you think it's setting up a trap for conservative? Do you think it's good for conservative, as what the Trump rhetoric has been for Canada? What do you see the relation between Trump's conservatism and Canadian conservatism?
So my thoughts on this have actually been quite unpopular in Canada recently. I'm very much on board with what Trump's doing. We hear about the tariffs, and this is talking a big game. We know it's not going to happen exactly like it's being suggested. The idea is to push really hard and then hope that negotiations come afterwards. But the Canadian politicians are using this as a vehicle to launch their own campaigns right now, and instilling fear into Canadians. And then this whole Trump derangement syndrome thing is coming about because of it. I think that Trump is doing a lot of of great things in America. I think I would like to see a lot more of what he's doing with Doge, with all of the things that's happening. But, with trade relations with Canada, Canada really needs to start looking introspectively in this regard. Canada is a national security threat to the United States of America. With the amount of fentanyl, the drug crisis, we've become a hub internationally for the manufacture of fentanyl and other drugs. And we're sending them, they say it's only 1% going down to the United States, but that's largely because right now the United States is flooded with these products from other places. We're sending this fentanyl from Canada is going to England. It's going to all over Europe, and it's going to Australia. They should be up in arms about what's happening in Canada. I know Trump's up in arms because as he tries to clean up the mess that's going on in the US by cleaning up the cartels, all that drug trade is going to start flowing south of the border. So Canada needs to look really hard introspectively. We've got a very corrupt system. We've got drug problems. We've got border crisis. We've got the number of terrorists, for example, on terrorist watch lists that have entered from the Canadian border is much higher than we see coming from the southern border in Mexico and the United States. So I definitely see what Trump's doing as a positive thing long term. I think what the Canadian politicians are doing is playing it for their own personal games, but I think this is going to ultimately hurt Canada more. What we need to do is get on board with what Trump's saying about cleaning up our act. And I think that's what we should be doing.
Last question, and just follow up on this whole thing. Where do you think the conservative movement should go from here? Just being a healthy critique of the whole movement.
There's a strategy here, like Canadian conservatives on a federal level. So this is like we're at the BC provincial conservative AGM, but and they're separate entities altogether. But on a federal level, when it comes to what's going on with Trump, I think the conservatives are just soft. They're completely soft, and they're trying to pander to a particular group of Canadians in Southwestern Ontario. Like that's really what this has all come down to. I think on the level, conservatives need to start touching the third rail, and they're afraid to. The political third rail in Canada is transfer payments. It's, supply management. They won't touch it because they don't want to lose those votes. But these are the things that are actually causing us trouble with the United States. Most people don't know that as they're hearing Donald Trump threaten us with 25% tariffs. Do you have any idea what the tariffs are on cheese, for example? 275% on cheese products. Other dairy products, if you add up all the dairy products, it's about 250%. Now, some people will come back and say, well, there's quotas and we do allow it up until a certain amount. But that's just a criminal organization for it's legal, but quotas are it's gangsterism. It really is.
Well, the British left the deal because we were the dairy cartel.
I talk about this all the time. I say, you think Donald Trump's out to lunch. What about the Brits? The Brits in 2024 in January, they walked away from the table. They said, listen, when you're ready to put your big boy pants on and come to the negotiation table, come on back. But we're not dealing with you. You're just not serious. You're fundamentally just not serious. Canada has some serious trade barriers, trade restrictions. And I think Donald Trump is trying to encourage Canada, and not in a nice way, maybe in a little bit of a tough way, encourage Canada to ease up on some of their trade barriers that they have. And this, I think, is the direction that I think that the conservatives in Canada should be going on. But what they're trying to do is play it safe. And I think when they play it safe, it's really hard to tell the difference between the liberal platform and the conservative platform for most voters. And right now, because Canadians are so primed for the liberals, I think without just Justin Trudeau, we're going to see a lot of those ridings in Toronto and in Southwestern Ontario going to the Liberals. And that's unfortunate. I think Trump was a polarizing figure. I've heard this back and forth. People say, if the Conservatives in Canada played too hardball and went too far, they'll never get elected. But that's what they said about Trump for 3 elections that I believe he won in the United States of America. So I think playing hardball, I think touching the third rail will do the Conservatives better than just being soft.
Well, that was Clyde. Clyde runs the media podcast, and the podcast is called Clyde Do Something. So if you haven't subscribed it, please go and subscribe to Clyde Do Something. Thank you for talking to us.